The coffee shop on Michigan Avenue hummed with the chaos of a Chicago morning, its air thick with the scent of roasted beans and the clatter of ceramic mugs. Lila Brooks, a 29-year-old Black American woman with rich, dark skin and warm brown eyes, sat in a corner booth, her untouched cappuccino cooling beside a crisp $100 bill. Her auburn hair, pulled into a neat bun, framed her face, and her modest cardigan, forest green, her favorite, felt like armor against the absurdity of the moment. Across from her, Ethan Caldwell, a 34-year-old white American man with pale skin and piercing blue eyes, adjusted his sleek silver watch, a nervous tick Lila noticed within minutes of their meeting. His tailored navy suit hugged his broad shoulders, and his dark hair, perfectly styled, screamed wealth and control. Yet, beneath the polished exterior, there was a crack, something desperate in how his fingers fidgeted. "Let me be clear," Lila said, her voice steady despite the surreal proposal. "You're offering me $50,000 to pretend to be your wife for 1 week?" Her brow arched, her occupational therapist's instinct kicking in, reading his body language as carefully as her patience. Ethan's jaw tightened, his gaze meeting hers with an intensity that made the bustling coffee shop fade into the background. "My mother, Abigail, is 68, with stage 4 pancreatic cancer," he said quietly, the words heavy with grief. "The doctors give her 2 weeks, maybe 3 if we're lucky. She's spent years worrying I'll die alone, no family to ground me. I can't let her leave this world thinking that." Lila leaned back, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. She'd seen grief before, families navigating terminal diagnoses, the helpless ache in their eyes. Ethan's storm-blue eyes held that same raw vulnerability, starkly contrasting his commanding presence. As an occupational therapist, Lila recognized the weight of his request with her deep empathy and knack for helping patients reclaim their lives. "I'm so sorry about your mother," she said, meaning it, her voice softening. "But why me? You could hire an actress, someone polished, someone who fits your world." She gestured subtly at his watch, its gleam catching the morning light, a silent nod to the chasm between her modest life and his. Ethan leaned forward, his cologne, a crisp, cedarwood scent, briefly overwhelming her senses. "I saw you yesterday at Northwestern Memorial," he said. "You were helping an elderly patient, a man struggling to button his shirt after a stroke. You stayed with him, patient and encouraging, until he got it right. When he smiled, you lit up like it was your victory too." Lila's breath caught, her mind flashing to Mr. Thompson, 72, whose trembling hands had finally mastered 3 buttons after 20 minutes. "That's my job," she said, a touch defensive, her dark skin warming under his scrutiny. "Maybe," Ethan replied, his voice softer now. "But the way you stayed past your shift, celebrating his small win, that wasn't just duty. That was kindness. My mother, Abigail, was a librarian for 35 years. She can spot a fake a mile away. An actress would never fool her. But you—" He paused, searching her face. "You're real. She'd believe I could fall for someone like you." The compliment landed awkwardly, highlighting Lila's ordinariness, her simple wardrobe, her beat-up Honda parked outside. Yet there was sincerity in his tone that made her heart skip. Lila's mind raced. $50,000 could erase her student loans, fund her dream of a community therapy program for underserved patients, maybe even let her take that trip to New Orleans she'd been promising herself since her mother's death 4 years ago. But pretending to be someone's wife? It felt like a betrayal of the honesty she prided herself on, the integrity she brought to her work. "Why not just tell her the truth?" she asked, her voice low. "That you're not ready to settle down?" Ethan's laugh was bitter and devoid of humor, Because I've been a selfish bastard, too focused on my company to build anything real. Because her biggest fear is that I'll end up like my father, gone, leaving nothing but regret. I can't let her die with that fear. His vulnerability disarmed her, a crack in the facade of the billionaire CEO. Lila studied him, searching for deception, but found only exhaustion and a son's desperate love. She said, "I need to think about this," though her thoughts were already tangled. The $100 bill on the table, pocket change to him, 2 weeks' groceries to her, felt like a test. Ethan added quietly that the funeral home called about plots. "She wants to be buried beside my father, but they're $12,000 each. She's too proud to ask for help, but I hear her worrying at night. I can afford it, but she doesn't know that. She thinks she's a burden." Lila's chest tightened. Her mother, lost to breast cancer at 55, had worried about hospital bills in her final days, a pain Lila couldn't erase. 1 week of pretending could ease Abigail's fears and change Lila's life. "I'll need a contract," she said finally, her voice firm. "Ground rules, clear boundaries, nothing inappropriate." Relief flooded Ethan's features, softening the hard lines of his face. "Of course, whatever you need." He extended his hand across the table. "Thank you, Lila. You have no idea what this means." Lila felt a jolt as their palms met, his grip warm, steady, his skin pale against her dark fingers. For a fleeting moment, she wondered what it might feel like if this were real, if someone like Ethan could want her for more than a transaction. Then she pulled away, grounding herself in reality. This was a job, not a fairy tale. "When do we start?" she asked, tucking the $100 bill into her wallet, a small act of defiance. "Tomorrow, 2 p.m. She's expecting to meet you at the hospital." Ethan stood, his height commanding the small booth. "And Lila? If you're in, share your thoughts with me later. Maybe over coffee again? I'd love to hear what you think about this crazy plan." His smile was tentative, almost boyish, and Lila couldn't help but smile back. "Maybe I will," she said, thinking of the stories she loved sharing with friends, the kind that sparked debates over dinner. "I bet many people would have opinions on a deal like this." As Ethan left, Lila sipped her cappuccino, which was now cold. She imagined telling this story to an audience, maybe on a platform where people connect over wild, heartfelt tales. What would you do? She thought. Take the money and play the part, or walk away from a lie, even if it's for love. Drop your thoughts below. Give this moment a thumbs up if it hooked you, and stick around for what happens next. Lila wasn't sure what she'd gotten herself into, but one thing was clear. This week would change everything. Lila Brooks stood outside room 412 at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, her heart thumping against her ribs like a drumbeat. The emerald dress she wore, her best, pulled from the back of her closet, clung to her frame, its fabric a stark contrast to the scrubs she usually donned for work. She smoothed it nervously, her fingers brushing the crisp $100 bill tucked in her purse, a reminder of the deal she'd struck with Ethan Caldwell. Through the small window in the hospital door, she saw Ethan sitting beside a hospital bed, his broad shoulders hunched, his hand clasping that of a frail woman with silver hair that caught the afternoon light like spun silk. Abigail Caldwell, Ethan's mother, looked smaller than Lila had imagined, but her presence radiated a quiet strength that made Lila's stomach twist. This was no simple performance. This was lying to a dying woman. "You can do this," Lila whispered to herself, the same pep talk she gave her patients before a grueling therapy session. "It's just acting. You help people every day. This is just helping differently." She knocked softly, her knuckles barely grazing the door. Ethan's head snapped up, and his stern businessman's mask slipped when his eyes met hers, revealing something softer, almost vulnerable. For a fleeting moment, Lila could practically believe the warmth in his storm-blue gaze was real. He stood, crossing the room in 2 strides, and opened the door. "Mom," he said, his voice steady but laced with something raw. "This is Lila." Lila stepped inside, the sterile scent of antiseptic sharp in her nose. Abigail's gray eyes, sharp and twinkling despite the oxygen cannula snaking across her face, locked onto her. "So, you're the one who finally tamed my stubborn son," Abigail said, her voice weak but warm, carrying the cadence of someone who'd spent decades wrangling library patrons. She patted the edge of her bed with surprising firmness. "Sit, dear. Let me see you properly." Lila approached, hyper-aware of Ethan watching her every move. She settled on the bed's edge, her hands clasped to hide their trembling. Abigail reached for one, turning Lila's palm up, as if reading it like a book. "You have kind hands," she observed, her gaze piercing. "A healer's hands." Lila swallowed, grateful for a question she could answer honestly. "I'm an occupational therapist here, on the rehabilitation floor. I help patients regain independence, buttoning shirts, holding spoons, things we take for granted." Abigail's face lit up, her smile crinkling the corners of her eyes. "How wonderful! I was a librarian for 35 years. We're both in the business of helping people find their way, aren't we?" The genuine delight in her voice sent a pang of guilt through Lila's chest. This woman was spending her precious energy celebrating a lie, a fake daughter-in-law who'd been hired to play a part. "Tell me how you two met," Abigail continued, settling back against her pillows with an eagerness that made Lila's mouth dry. They hadn't rehearsed this. She glanced at Ethan, panic fluttering in her chest, but he stepped in smoothly, standing behind her chair. His hand rested lightly on her shoulder, sending an unexpected shiver down her spine. "We met in the hospital cafeteria," he said, his voice calm, practiced. "I was grabbing coffee after visiting you, and Lila was having lunch between patients. I looked like a wreck. Sorry, Mom," he added with a sheepish grin, as Abigail raised a mock-stern eyebrow. "Lila took pity on me and invited me to sit. We just talked." Lila nodded, surprised by how easily the story flowed. "He was so worried about you," she added, the truth of his devotion making the lie feel less heavy. "He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I could see how much he loves you." Abigail's eyes softened, filling with tears. "My boy's always been good at hiding his feelings. His father was the same. He thought that showing emotion was weakness." She squeezed Lila's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "But love isn't weakness, is it, dear?" Lila's throat tightened, memories of her parents flooding back, their fierce love through her father's addiction, her mother's illness. "No," she whispered. "Love is the strongest thing there is." Ethan's hand tightened on her shoulder, a subtle pressure that felt like acknowledgement. Abigail's gaze flickered between them, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if catching something unspoken. "You two look right together," she said, but there was a hint of curiosity in her tone, a librarian's knack for spotting a story that didn't quite add up. Lila's heart skipped. Did Abigail suspect? Before she could dwell on it, Abigail yawned, her energy visibly fading. "I think I'll rest now," she said, her voice softer. "But come back tomorrow, won't you? Both of you." Ethan bent to kiss her forehead. "Of course, Mom. We'll be here." As they left the room, Lila's fingers brushed the $100 bill in her purse, grounding her in the reality of their arrangement. In the elevator, silence hung heavy between them. Ethan stared at the floor numbers, his jaw tight. "That went well," Lila said, her voice echoing in the small space. Too well, Ethan murmured, his tone clipped. She's already attached to you. Lila twisted her hands together, Abigail's knowing glance replaying in her mind. She's incredible, Lila said. I see why you're doing this. Ethan's eyes met hers, raw and unguarded. She's all I have left. If this gives her peace, it's worth it. They stepped into the hospital's main lobby, the October air crisp beyond the glass doors. Lila paused, struck by the weight of Abigail's warmth, her trust. Ethan, what if she sees through us? She asked. He ran a hand through his hair, messing its perfect style. Then we make it convincing enough to believe ourselves. Lila, tell me if you're feeling as tangled up as I am about this. Tell me. Over coffee tomorrow? Or share it with someone. Stories like this have a way of sparking questions. His half-smile was disarming, and Lila found herself nodding. She said I might do that, thinking of how she'd tell this tale to friends, maybe even an audience who'd debate the ethics of their charade. What would you do? She wondered. Lie for love or walk away? Drop your thoughts below, nod if this moment grabbed you, and stay with us to see where this goes. As they parted ways, Lila felt the first stirrings of something dangerous. Not just guilt, but a connection to Ethan that threatened to blur the lines of their deal. The hospital room felt smaller as Lila Brooks sat on the edge of Abigail Caldwell's bed, the weight of their deception pressing against her chest. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly, casting stark shadows across the sterile white walls, and the steady beep of monitors underscored the fragility of the moment. Abigail's gray eyes, sharp despite her frail frame, studied Lila with an intensity that made her feel exposed, as if her carefully rehearsed role as Ethan's fiancée could unravel with one wrong word. Ethan stood behind her, his hand still resting lightly on her shoulder from their earlier exchange, the warmth of his touch lingering like an unspoken question. Lila's fingers twitched in her lap, itching to fiddle with the hem of her emerald dress, but she kept them still, determined to play her part. Abigail's smile softened, but there was a glint in her eyes, a librarian's knack for reading between the lines. You two make a good pair, she said, her voice thin but laced with conviction. But I want to give you something, Lila. She gestured weakly toward the bedside table, her oxygen cannula shifting slightly with the effort. Ethan moved quickly, his polished shoes silent on the linoleum, and retrieved a small velvet box with its worn but lovingly preserved edges. He handed it to his mother, his expression unreadable, though Lila caught a flicker of unease in his storm-blue gaze. Abigail opened the box, revealing a vintage ring, emerald at its center, surrounded by a delicate halo of tiny diamonds that caught the light like distant stars. This was my mother's, Abigail said, her voice steady now, carrying the weight of memory. She gave it to me when I married Ethan's father. I've saved it for the woman who'd make my son whole. Lila's breath caught, her heart stumbling over the sincerity in Abigail's words. Oh, I couldn't, she began, her hands rising in protest. But Abigail's grip on her wrist was surprisingly firm, guiding the ring toward her left hand. Nonsense, Abigail said, her tone brooking no argument. Family treasures belong with family. She slipped the ring onto Lila's finger, where it settled as if crafted for her, the gold warm against her skin, the emerald gleaming with quiet promise. Lila stared at it, the weight of it both foreign and strangely comforting, as if it anchored her to a truth she hadn't agreed to. It's beautiful, she managed, her voice barely above a whisper, guilt clawing at her throat. This wasn't hers to keep, not the ring, role, or love Abigail believed in so fiercely. Ethan's voice broke the silence, rough with emotion. Mom, are you sure? His hand dropped from Lila's shoulder, and she felt the absence like a chill. Abigail nodded, her eyes moving between them, that knowing glint sharpening. She said she was more sure than I've been about anything in a long time. I see how she looks at you, Ethan, and how you soften around her. That's not something you fake. Lila's heart hammered, Abigail's words slicing through the lie. Did she see love where there was none? Or was something real stirring beneath the pretense? The thought terrified Lila, who'd built her life on practicality, on helping others without risking her own heart. "Thank you," Lila said, her voice catching as she met Abigail's gaze. The older woman's smile was radiant, but her eyes held that same probing curiosity from their first meeting, as if she were piecing together a puzzle. "You'll come back tomorrow, won't you?" Abigail asked, her energy waning, her head sinking deeper into the pillow. "I want to hear more about you, Lila. Your work, your dreams." Ethan bent to kiss her forehead, his movements tender. "We'll be here, Mom." As they stepped into the hallway, the door clicking shut behind them, Lila twisted the ring on her finger, its weight a reminder of the line they'd crossed. She wasn't just playing a part anymore. She was carrying a piece of Abigail's heart. In the elevator, the silence was heavy, the hum of the descent amplifying the tension. Ethan stared at the floor numbers, his jaw tight, his hands shoved into his pockets. Lila clutched her purse, the $100 bill inside a stark reminder of their deal. "That went too well," Ethan said finally, his voice low, clipped. "She gave you her mother's ring, Lila. That was meant for my real wife someday." The word real hit like a slap, snapping Lila back to the truth of their arrangement. She said I tried to refuse it, defensively, her fingers brushing the emerald. She insisted. I didn't want to upset her. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, messing its perfect style. "I know. It's not your fault. I just didn't expect her to believe in us so completely." They stepped into the hospital lobby, the crisp and biting October air visible through the glass doors. Lila paused, the ring's weight pulling at her thoughts. "She's so sure of us," she said, almost to herself. "What if she sees through it?" Ethan turned to her, his eyes raw, unguarded. "Then we make it real enough to fool ourselves." "Lila, this is messing with my head too. If you're feeling as lost as I am, talk to me. Or tell someone else. Your friends, maybe. Stories like this stir up questions, don't they?" His half-smile was disarming, and Lila felt a tug of connection, dangerous and unbidden. "Yeah," she said, thinking of how she'd recount this moment to Maya, her colleague, or maybe to an audience hungry for tales of love and lies. People would have much to say about a ring like this, a promise like this. She imagined sharing this story, the weight of that emerald sparking debates. Would you wear a ring that wasn't yours? Could you lie to someone's heart for their peace? Share your thoughts below. Give a thumbs up if this moment pulled you in, and stay with us to see how deep this deception goes. As they parted ways, Lila twisted the ring again, dreading the day she'd have to return it, and wondering why part of her hoped she wouldn't have to. Lila Brooks pushed open the heavy door to the rehabilitation wing of Northwestern Memorial Hospital, the familiar scent of antiseptic and lemon polish grounding her in a world where she felt in control. The emerald dress from yesterday's visit with Abigail Caldwell was replaced by her usual navy scrubs, her auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. The vintage ring on her left hand, Abigail's mother's heirloom, felt heavy, its emerald catching the fluorescent light as she moved. It reminded her of the lie she'd woven in room 412, which had left her sleepless, twisting the ring in the dark of her small apartment. Now, back in her element, Lila hoped the rhythm of her work would quiet the storm in her chest. She entered the therapy room, where Mrs. Carter, A 67-year-old stroke survivor sat at a table, her hands trembling as she gripped a buttoned shirt. "Morning, Mrs. Carter," Lila said, her voice warm, slipping into the role she knew best. "Ready to tackle those buttons again?" Mrs. Carter's eyes, clouded with frustration, brightened at Lila's smile. She teased, "Only if you've got all day," her voice slurred but determined. Lila knelt beside her, guiding her fingers with gentle precision. "One at a time, like we practiced. You've got this." For 20 minutes, they worked in quiet focus, the room filled only with the soft clinking of buttons and Mrs. Carter's determined breaths. When the final button slipped through its hole, Mrs. Carter's face lit up, a trembling smile breaking through. "I did it," she whispered, pride radiating from her. Lila's heart swelled, the same rush she felt every time a patient reclaimed a piece of their independence. She said, "You're a rock star," squeezing Mrs. Carter's shoulder. She stayed late, charting progress notes, her pen moving in neat, deliberate strokes. She aimed to help people rebuild their lives, one small victory at a time. But today, her thoughts drifted to Abigail's hopeful eyes, to Ethan's vulnerable confession in the coffee shop. The $50,000 he'd offered could fund her dream, a community therapy program for patients who couldn't afford care. Yet, pretending to be his wife felt like a betrayal of the honesty she brought to moments like these, where trust was everything. As she packed up, her colleague Maya appeared, leaning against the doorway with a knowing grin. "You're glowing, Lila, but you look like you haven't slept. What's going on?" Maya's dark eyes sparkled with curiosity, her braids swaying as she tilted her head. Lila hesitated, the ring on her finger a silent weight. "Just a tough decision," she said, tucking her notes into her bag. Maya raised an eyebrow. "Spill. You've got that look, like you're carrying someone else's secret." Lila laughed, but it was strained. "Let's say I'm helping someone in a way I never expected." She thought of Abigail, frail but fierce, believing in a love that didn't exist. And Ethan, his storm-blue eyes, his raw need to give his mother peace. Could she keep up the act without losing herself? Maya sat on the table's edge, her scrubs wrinkled from a long shift. "You always follow your heart, Lila. Like with Mrs. Carter, you stay late, you cheer her on. Whatever this is, trust that instinct. It's never wrong." Lila's throat tightened. Her heart was a tangle of guilt and possibility. The money could change lives, but the lie could unravel hers. "What if my heart's telling me two things at once?" she asked, her fingers brushing the ring. Maya grinned. "Then you're in for a hell of a story. You should tell it sometime. It sounds like something people would talk about for days." Lila smiled, imagining sharing this with a crowd, the kind who'd debate the ethics of her choice over coffee or online. "Would you pretend to be someone's love for a cause? Could you wear a ring that carries a dying woman's hope? Drop your thoughts below, nod if this hits home, and stick around to see where Lila's heart leads her." She left the therapy room, the hospital's quiet halls amplifying her thoughts. Outside, the October air was sharp, and she pulled her cardigan tighter, the ring glinting under a streetlight. Her old Honda waited in the parking lot, symbolizing her practical life. But practicality felt distant now. Abigail's trust, Ethan's desperation, they were pulling her into something bigger, something that scared her as much as it thrilled her. Back at her apartment, Lila sat on her worn couch, staring at the ring. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. "Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Mom's expecting us. You okay?" She typed a quick reply. "I'm in. Just processing." But as she set the phone down, her mind replayed Mrs. Carter's smile, Abigail's knowing glance, and Ethan's hand on her shoulder. Her work was about truth, helping patients face their realities. Could she live a lie, even for love? Or was the truth that something fundamental was stirring beneath the pretense, something she wasn't ready to name? Lila twisted the ring, its emerald catching the dim light. Whatever came next, she knew one thing. This week would test her heart in ways her patients' victories never had. The October air bit at Lila Brooks's skin as she stepped out of Northwestern Memorial Hospital, the weight of Abigail Caldwell's vintage ring heavy on her finger. The emerald gleamed under the streetlights, a constant reminder of the lie she'd woven in room 412. Ethan Caldwell walked beside her, his broad shoulders tense, his navy suit jacket draped over her cardigan against the Chicago chill. The hospital's glass doors slid shut behind them, muffling the hum of the lobby. But Lila's mind was loud with echoes of Abigail's trust and her morning with Mrs. Carter, coaxing buttons through trembling hands. Her work as an occupational therapist was about truth, helping patients face their realities. Yet here she was, playing a part for $50,000, pretending to be the fiancé of a man she barely knew. Ethan paused on the sidewalk, his storm-blue eyes catching hers. "He said you were perfect in there," his voice low, rough with something unspoken. "When you told Mom, love is the strongest thing, you meant it." Lila's cheeks warmed, her breath catching. "I was thinking of my parents," she admitted, her voice soft. "They held on through everything, addiction, poverty, my mom's cancer. Love kept them going." Ethan's gaze softened, a vulnerability cracking his polished exterior. "I'm sorry you lost them," he said, stepping closer, close enough that she caught the faint cedarwood scent of his cologne. "I wish I'd known that kind of love." The moment stretched, charged with an intensity Lila hadn't anticipated. Her heart pounded, the ring on her finger suddenly burning. Ethan's hand brushed her arm, tentative, then steadier. "Lila," he murmured, and before she could think, he leaned in, his lips meeting hers in a soft kiss at first, then deepening as she leaned into him, her hands fisted in his shirt, the world narrowing to the warmth of his mouth, the taste of coffee and possibility. The lie felt real for a heartbeat, as if they weren't actors in a desperate charade, but two people choosing each other. A flash broke the spell, then another. Lila pulled back, gasping, her eyes darting to the sidewalk where a small crowd had gathered. Camera phones glinted, capturing their private moment. "Oh no," she breathed, recognizing the click of shutters. "Ethan, people are filming." His face paled as he followed her gaze, spotting the phones aimed at them. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice tight. "I didn't think." But it was too late. The crowd dispersed, some smiling at the romantic scene, others already tapping their screens, sending their kiss into the digital void. By the time Lila reached her apartment, her phone was buzzing incessantly. Notifications flooded in. Texts from Maya, her colleague, and alerts from social media. She sank onto her worn couch, still wearing Ethan's jacket, its warmth a faint comfort against the panic rising in her chest. Maya's text read, "Girl, you're all over the internet." Lila opened her phone, her heart sinking at the headline, "Mystery Woman Wins Billionaire's Heart Outside Hospital." The photo was striking, Ethan's hand cupping her face, her expression soft, vulnerable, the emerald ring glinting on her finger. Another post called her Caldwell's mystery bride. The internet was already spinning tales of a secret engagement. Lila's stomach churned. She'd agreed to fool Abigail, not the world. Her patients depended on her quiet professionalism, her ability to be a steady presence in their recovery. What would Mrs. Carter think, seeing her therapist splashed across gossip sites? She scrolled through comments, some gushing over the fairy tale, others speculating about her motives. Gold digger? One read. Lila flinched, the word cutting deeper than she'd expected. Her life, her small apartment, her beat-up Honda, her late nights charting patient progress, was invisible to these strangers. They saw only the ring, the kiss, the billionaire. Ethan's name flashed on her screen, and she answered, her voice shaky. Ethan, they think we're engaged. This is a mess. His tone was tight with concern. Are you okay? I've been trying to reach you. Lila paced, her fingers twisting the ring. No, I'm not okay. I work here, Ethan. My patients, my colleagues, they'll see this. What happens when they find out it's fake? There was a pause, heavy with unspoken weight. I'm handling it, he said. My PR team's on damage control. But Lila, maybe... He hesitated. Perhaps it doesn't have to be fake. Her breath caught. What are you saying? Ethan's voice softened, raw. That kiss. It felt real. More real than anything I've felt in years. What if we let this be something more? Lila's heart raced, her mind torn between the safety of her carefully controlled life and the reckless pull of his words. You don't know me, she whispered. We're strangers playing a part. Ethan's response was quiet but firm. Are we? Because that moment on the sidewalk didn't feel like pretending. Lila hung up, her thoughts a whirlwind. She imagined telling Maya this story, or a crowd drawn to tales of love and lies. Would you let a kiss change everything? Could a moment caught on camera rewrite your life? Share your thoughts below. Give a thumbs up if this twist hooked you, and stay with us to see what Lila chooses. She stared at the viral photo on her phone, her face unfamiliar in its vulnerability. The world now saw her as Ethan's bride, but the real question was what she saw in herself, and whether she could trust the man whose kiss had turned her quiet life into a public spectacle. Lila Brooks sat on the edge of her worn couch, the glow of her phone screen casting shadows across her small Chicago apartment. The viral photo from outside the hospital, her and Ethan Caldwell locked in a kiss, Abigail's emerald ring glinting on her finger, still buzzed through her notifications, each ping a reminder of how their private lie had become a public spectacle. Ethan's jacket, draped over her shoulders, carried his faint cedarwood scent, reminding her in the moment that had spiraled out of control. Her navy scrubs were folded on a chair, symbolizing the steady life she'd built as an occupational therapist, now threatened by headlines calling her Caldwell's mystery bride. Her patients, like Mrs. Carter, relied on her calm professionalism. How could she face them if they saw her as a billionaire's fiancée, bought for $50,000? Ethan's words from their call echoed in her mind. Maybe it doesn't have to be fake. The kiss had felt real, too real, stirring something in Lila she'd buried since her parents' deaths, a longing for connection, for love that didn't end in loss. But his suggestion to make it more, to let the world believe their lie, felt like a leap she wasn't ready for. She twisted Abigail's ring, its weight a mix of guilt and possibility. Her phone buzzed again. Ethan was texting. Can we talk? In person. My place tonight? Lila hesitated, her thumb hovering over the screen. She needed answers, not just about the kiss, but about the man behind it. Okay, she replied. Be there in an hour. Ethan's penthouse overlooked Lake Michigan, its floor-to-ceiling windows framing a city that sparkled like a promise. The space was pristine, marble floors, neutral furniture, a bar cart stocked with bottles Lila knew cost more than her monthly rent. Ethan greeted her, his tie loosened, his dark hair slightly mussed, starkly contrasting to his usual polish. Wine? He offered. his voice tight, as if bracing for a storm. Lila nodded, accepting a glass of red, its rich aroma grounding her nerves. "We need boundaries," she said, standing by the window, the city's lights reflecting in her eyes. "This," she gestured at her phone, the viral photo still open, "is out of control. We're supposed to be fooling your mom, not the world." Ethan set his glass down, his storm blue eyes meeting hers. "I know. 3 days ago, this was simple. A deal to give Mom peace. Now." He ran a hand through his hair, his composure cracking. "That kiss, Lila. I can't tell what's real anymore." Her heart skipped, his honesty disarming her. "She said you wanted more," her voice steady but searching. "But you don't know me, Ethan." "Not really." He stepped closer, close enough that she felt his warmth. "I know you stayed late with a patient to celebrate 3 buttons. I know you spoke about your parents' love like it's a truth you carry. You're the first person who's made me question everything I've built." Lila's breath caught, but she held his gaze. "Then tell me something real about you. If this is more than a deal, I need to know who you are." Ethan's jaw tightened, and for a moment, she thought he'd deflect. Then he sighed, sinking onto the white sofa, his hands clasped tightly. "When I was 24, he began, his voice low. "I was engaged to Claire Morgan. It wasn't love. It was a merger. Her father was my dad's business partner, and the engagement was meant to seal a deal for Caldwell Industries. I went along with it. Thought it was what I owed my family, but the night before the wedding, I couldn't breathe. I felt trapped, like I was resigning my life for someone else's ambition. So I ran, left Chicago, didn't even call her. I sent my assistant to break it off." Lila's stomach churned, and the ring on her finger suddenly became heavier. "You left her at the altar?" she asked, her voice sharp. Ethan nodded, shame etching lines around his eyes. "I was a coward. I couldn't face her. Couldn't face the expectations. My father left us when I was 12. Walked out without a word. I swore I'd never be him, but running from Claire felt like I was. I built walls after that. Work, control, no relationships until you." His voice softened, raw. "You're not like Claire, Lila. You're not a transaction. But I'm terrified I'll hurt you the way I hurt her." Lila's heart pounded, torn between his vulnerability and the shadow of his past. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "If we're going to keep this up, I need the truth, all of it." Ethan stood, closing the distance between them. "Because I'm ashamed. Because I'm falling for you, and I don't know how to do this without breaking something." His hand reached for hers, stilling her nervous twisting of the ring. "But I want to try. For Mom. For you. For whatever this is becoming." Lila pulled her hand away, needing space to think. The viral photo, Abigail's trust, Ethan's past. It was all too much. "I need time," she said, stepping toward the door. "Tomorrow, we'll see your mom. But this," she gestured between them. "I don't know what it is yet." Ethan nodded, his expression a mix of hope and fear. "Fair. But Lila, if you're as tangled up as I am, talk it out. With Maya, with anyone. Stories like ours, they spark something. People would have a lot to say about this mess." She managed a small smile, thinking of how she'd share this with Maya. Or maybe an audience drawn to tales of truth and deception. Would you trust a man with a past like Ethan's? Can a kiss rewrite a heart's history? Drop your thoughts below. Give a thumbs up if this hits you. And stay with us to see what Lila decides. As she left, The ring caught the city's lights, a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. Lila Brooks stood in front of the mirror in her modest Chicago apartment, adjusting the simple navy dress she'd chosen for another hospital visit with Abigail Caldwell. The emerald ring on her finger, Abigail's family heirloom, caught the morning light, its weight a constant reminder of the lie she was living. The viral photo of her kiss with Ethan Caldwell still haunted her phone, headlines branding her as his fiancée, a role she'd only agreed to play for a week. Her navy scrubs, folded on a chair, called to her real life as an occupational therapist, where trust and truth anchored her work with patients like Mrs. Carter. But Ethan's confession last night, his abandoned engagement to Claire Morgan, leaving her at the altar, had cracked something in Lila. His vulnerability had drawn her closer, yet the shadow of his past made her question if she could trust him with her heart. Her phone buzzed, shattering her thoughts. An unknown number flashed on the screen. Lila hesitated, then answered, her voice cautious. "Hello?" A crisp, polished voice replied, "This is Claire Morgan, Ethan's ex-fiancée. I'm downstairs in your building's lobby. We need to talk." Lila's stomach dropped, her fingers tightening around the phone. Ethan had warned her about Claire, but facing her was another matter. "I don't think that's necessary," Lila began, but Claire cut her off. "I'm here now. 5 minutes, or I'll come up. Your choice." The line went dead, leaving Lila's heart pounding. She glanced at the ring, its emerald glinting like an accusation. What did Claire want, and why now? Lila grabbed her purse, still containing the $100 bill from Ethan's initial offer, and headed downstairs. In the lobby, Claire Morgan stood like a vision from another world. Tall, blonde, her tailored coat screaming old money. Her green eyes assessed Lila with a cold precision, making her acutely aware of her simple dress and unpolished shoes. "You must be Lila," Claire said, her smile sharp as a blade. "The woman who's stolen Ethan's heart, or at least his mother's ring." Lila's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "What do you want, Claire?" The other woman stepped closer, her heels clicking on the tile. "To congratulate you, of course, and make sure you know what you're signing up for." Before Lila could respond, Claire continued, her tone icy. 3 years ago, Ethan left me at the altar. St. Patrick's Cathedral, 200 guests, a reception at the Ritz-Carlton. I stood in my Vera Wang gown for 45 minutes, waiting, until his assistant delivered a note saying he wasn't coming. He didn't even have the guts to face me. Lila's breath caught, the image vivid and painful. She glanced at the ring, Claire's words echoing Ethan's confession. "He told me," Lila said, her voice firm but trembling. "He said it wasn't love, that it was a business deal." Claire's laugh was brittle. "Oh, he's good at rewriting history. That ring? I picked it out. It was meant for me. Until he ran, just like his father did when things got too real." Lila's heart stuttered. The comparison to Ethan's father, a man who'd abandoned his family, cutting deep. She remembered Ethan's shame last night, his fear of becoming that man. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, her fingers curling into fists. Claire's smile turned predatory. "Because Ethan has a pattern. He runs when it gets hard. Ask yourself, Lila, what makes you think you're different?" She paused, her eyes flicking to the ring. "Enjoy the fairy tale while it lasts." With that, she turned and left, her coat swirling like a storm cloud. Lila stood frozen, the lobby's fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Her phone buzzed again. Ethan, texting. "On my way to pick you up for Mom's visit. You okay?" She didn't reply, her mind reeling. Claire's words had cracked the fragile trust she'd begun to build with Ethan. Was she another safe choice? Someone who wouldn't challenge his carefully controlled world? She thought of her patients and the trust they placed in her to guide them through recovery. Could she trust Ethan not to run when their lie faced its next test? She stepped outside, the October air sharp against her skin. Ethan's sleek black car pulled up, and he stepped out, his dark hair catching the sunlight, his suit as polished as ever. But his eyes were shadowed, anxious. "Lila, what's wrong?" he asked, reading her expression. She took a breath, her voice steady despite the turmoil. "Claire was here. She told me about the wedding, the ring, everything. Why didn't you tell me she chose this?" She held up her hand, the emerald glinting accusingly. Ethan's face paled, his hands shoving into his pockets. "I didn't think it mattered. It was over years ago. I told you why I left her. But Lila said you didn't tell me the whole truth," her voice rising. "I'm supposed to walk into that hospital in an hour, pretend to be your fiancé, and now I'm wondering if I'm just another mistake you'll run from." Ethan stepped closer, his voice low, raw. "You're not a mistake, Lila. You're the first thing that's felt right in years. I should have told you about the ring. I was ashamed of how I hurt her, of who I was, but I'm not that man anymore." Lila searched his eyes, seeing the same vulnerability from last night, but Claire's warning lingered like a ghost. "I need time to process this," she said, stepping back. "We'll see your mom. Keep up the act for her. But after that, I need to know who I'm trusting." Ethan nodded, his jaw tight. "I'll earn it, Lila, whatever it takes." The ring felt heavier as they drove to the hospital, symbolizing both Abigail's hope and Claire's warning. Lila thought of sharing this moment with Maya, or a crowd drawn to tangled tales of love and trust. Would you believe a man who ran once before? Can a ring carry both hope and hurt? Drop your thoughts below. Give a thumbs up if this clash pulls you in, and stay with us to see if Lila can trust again. The hospital loomed ahead, and with it, another test of their fragile pretense. Lila Brooks sat on a weathered bench in Chicago's Grant Park, the October wind tugging at her cardigan as she twisted the emerald ring on her finger. Abigail Caldwell's heirloom felt like a tether to an unraveling lie, its green stone catching the fading afternoon light. Claire Morgan's words from that morning, her icy claim that Ethan would run again, just as he'd left her at the altar, echoed in Lila's mind, clashing with the memory of Ethan's raw confession in his penthouse. The viral photo of their kiss, now plastered across social media, had turned their private deception into a public spectacle, threatening the quiet life Lila cherished as an occupational therapist. She thought of Mrs. Carter's trembling smile, the trust her patients placed in her steady presence. Could she trust Ethan, a man with a running history, to stay? Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. Abigail's name flashed on the screen, and Lila's heart clenched. She'd been so caught up in Claire's warning that she'd nearly forgotten the woman at the heart of this charade. "Mrs. Caldwell?" Lila answered, her voice tight. Abigail's voice was weak but sharp, and the hum of hospital monitors faded in the background. "Lila, dear, where are you? Ethan's pacing like a caged animal won't tell me what's wrong." Lila closed her eyes, guilt washing over her. "I'm sorry. There's been a complication." Abigail's tone sharpened. "Did that Morgan woman contact you?" Lila's breath caught, stunned by her perceptiveness. "How did you know?" "Sweetheart, I've known about Claire for 3 years," Abigail said, her voice softening but resolute. "Ethan told me after he ran from that wedding. It wasn't love. It was a cage, built by his father's business partner to merge their companies. Ethan felt trapped, manipulated into a life that wasn't his. He ran to save himself, not to hurt her." Lila's grip tightened on the phone, Claire's accusation. Ethan as his father's echo, shifting in her mind. "He never told me why. Lila said, her voice trembling. Not the whole story. Abigail sighed, the sound heavy with years of wisdom. He's ashamed, Lila. He thinks running weakens him, like his father who walked out on us. But there's a difference between abandoning love and refusing a loveless trap. Lila stood, pacing the park's gravel path, the city's hum, distant against the thud of her heart. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Abigail's voice grew quieter, the monitor's beeps more pronounced. Because I see how you look at him, Lila, and how he softens around you. That's not pretend, no matter how this started. I've spent 35 years reading people as a librarian. I know real when I see it. Lila's throat tightened, Abigail's words echoing her fear that something true was growing beneath their lie. But Claire said, he'll run again. Lila whispered, what if I'm just another mistake? Abigail's laugh was faint but fierce. You're not Claire, and he's not the boy he was. He's been here every day for weeks, Lila, not out of duty but love. You've brought him back to life. Now, listen carefully. I don't have much time. The doctors say the infection's not responding like they hoped. I may not see you next week. Lila's chest constricted, panic flaring. Mrs. Caldwell, you need to rest. I'll rest when I'm gone. Abigail interrupted, her tone commanding. This matters. Do you love my son? Not the idea of him, not the security, but Ethan, the stubborn, scared, wonderful man who's too afraid of becoming his father to see he's already better. Lila stopped pacing, her eyes stinging with tears. She thought of Ethan's hand on her shoulder in the hospital, his vulnerability in the penthouse, the way his kiss had felt like a promise he didn't know how to keep. Yes, she whispered, the admission terrifying and freeing. I love him, completely. Abigail's voice softened, and her smile was audible. Then come to this hospital and fight for him. Not for me, though I want it, but because love like yours doesn't come twice. Don't let fear win, Lila. You'll regret it forever. The line went quiet, save for Abigail's labored breathing. Are you okay? Lila asked, her voice breaking. Just tired, sweetheart. Abigail replied. But I'll hold on to see you two together. Now find my son. The call ended, and Lila stared at her phone, Abigail's words a beacon in the fog of her doubt. She thought of Maya, her colleague, who'd urge her to tell this story, the tangle of love, lies, and a dying woman's faith. Would you fight for a love born from deception? Can a mother's insight turn a lie into truth? Drop your thoughts below. Give a thumbs up if this moment grips you, and stay with us to see if Lila leaps. She squared her shoulders, the ring settling comfortably on her finger. No longer a burden, but a bridge to a future hustler possibility she was ready to claim. Lila headed for the hospital, determined to face Ethan and fight for the truth. Lila Brooks raced through the sliding doors of Northwestern Memorial Hospital, her heart pounding like a drum against her ribs. The October evening was sharp, the Chicago skyline a blur as she clutched her purse, the weight of Abigail Caldwell's emerald ring anchoring her to the moment. Abigail's words from their phone call echoed in her mind. Fight for him. Love like yours doesn't come twice. Lila's navy dress, the same one she'd worn to face Claire Morgan's accusations, clung to her as she hurried toward the elevators, her colleague Maya trailing behind, clutching a bouquet of white roses from the hospital gift shop. Slow down, Lila, Maya called, her voice breathless. You'll trip in those heels. But Lila couldn't slow down. Abigail's fading health, Ethan's confession about his past, and the viral kiss that had turned their lie into a public spectacle had shattered her careful control. She needed to see Ethan, to face the truth of what was growing between them. The elevator ride felt endless, each ding amplifying the urgency in her chest. When the doors opened on the 4th floor, chaos greeted her. Nurses rushed in and out of Abigail's room, the shrill beeping of monitors cutting through the air. Ethan appeared around the corner, his dark hair disheveled, his tie askew, his storm blue eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion and fear. "Lila, thank God you're here," he said, his voice cracking. "She's stable, but barely. They had to intubate her 20 minutes ago. The infection spread faster than they expected." Lila's heart shattered, memories of her own mother's final days flooding back. Hospital rooms, machines, the helpless ache of watching someone slip away. "Can we see her?" she asked, her voice trembling. Dr. Patel approached, his expression grave. "One at a time, for a few minutes. She's sedated, but she can likely hear you." Ethan's hands clenched into fists, his knuckles white. "The doctors, they don't think she has much time." Lila reached for his hand, intertwining their fingers, her warmth steadying his trembling grip. "Ethan, look at me," she said, her voice firm despite the tears pricking her eyes. "Whatever happens, we face it together." His gaze met hers, raw and desperate. "I thought you were gone," he whispered. "After Claire, I thought I'd lost you, like I've lost everything else that matters." Lila cupped his face with her free hand, the ring glinting under the fluorescent lights. "I'm here," she said. "I'm not going anywhere. But I need you to promise me something. No more running. Not from this, us, or the hard things." Ethan leaned into her touch, his eyes searching hers. "I can't promise I won't be scared," he said, his voice rough. "But I promise to stay, to fight for us. You make me want to be better, Lila." Her heart swelled, Abigail's words about love's rarity anchoring her resolve. She thought of her patience, like Mrs. Carter, whose small victories she celebrated with unwavering faith. Could she bring that same faith to Ethan? A nurse emerged from Abigail's room, nodding. "She's asking for you both, but keep it brief." Lila and Ethan entered hand in hand, the ICU's sterile chill a stark contrast to the warmth of their clasped fingers. Abigail looked impossibly fragile, surrounded by tubes and wires, her silver hair limp against the white pillow. But her gray eyes, alert despite the breathing tube, brightened when she saw them. She reached out with a frail hand, and Lila took it gently, her therapist's instinct guiding her touch. "We're here," Lila said softly. "Both of us." Abigail's eyes moved to Ethan, then back to Lila, settling on their joined hands. She tapped Lila's hand 3 times, a deliberate gesture that spoke louder than words. "Lila said she wants to see us together," her voice catching as she glanced at Ethan. Abigail nodded slightly, her eyes gleaming with hope and urgency. Ethan's grip tightened, his voice breaking. "Mom, what if you go thinking this is a lie? What if I failed you again?" Lila squeezed his hand, her resolve hardening. "Then we stop lying," she said, her eyes locked on his, not just for her, but for us. "I love you, Ethan. Not the deal, not the ring, you." Ethan's breath hitched, his eyes glistening. "I love you too, Lila. More than I thought I could. I'm done pretending." Abigail's hand squeezed Lila's, her eyes bright with tears of joy. The monitors beeped steadily, a fragile reminder of time slipping away. Lila thought of her work, the moments she'd spent guiding patients through fear to find strength. This was no different, facing fear, choosing truth. "We'll make this right," she whispered to Abigail, who managed a faint nod. Ethan bent to kiss his mother's forehead, his voice soft. "We're here, Mom. Together." As they stepped back, Lila felt the ring settle on her finger, no longer a lie but a promise. She imagined telling Maya this story, or a crowd drawn to tales of love forged in crisis. Would you confess love in the face of loss? Can a dying woman's faith change everything? Drop your thoughts below. Give a thumbs up if this moment moves you, and stay with us to see what happens next. The ICU's weight pressed around them, but Lila knew that whatever came, they'd face it as one. The ICU at Northwestern Memorial Hospital buzzed with the relentless beep of monitors, starkly contrasting the quiet hope in Lila Brooks's heart. She stood in the small, sterile room, her ivory dress, simple, elegant, rushed from a boutique by her colleague Maya, hugging her frame. Abigail Caldwell's emerald ring gleamed on her finger, no longer a symbol of pretense, but a bridge to a truth she'd confessed hours ago. She loved Ethan Caldwell. The memory of their hospital corridor vow, "I'm not going anywhere," steadied her as she faced the bed where Abigail lay, fragile amidst tubes and wires, her silver hair faint against the white pillow. Ethan stood beside Lila, his charcoal suit emphasizing his broad shoulders, his storm blue eyes bright with a mix of fear and determination. The weight of their journey, from a paid deception to this moment, hung heavy in the air. Abigail's gray eyes, alert despite her breathing tube, flickered with joy as she saw them together. Her frail hand tapped Lila's 3 times, a silent plea for the wedding she'd urged over the phone. Lila glanced at Ethan, his face etched with the same resolve she felt. "She wants this," Lila said softly, her voice steady. "For us to be real." Ethan nodded, his grip tightening on her hand. "I'm ready, Lila. Not because of Mom, but because I choose you." Her heart swelled, memories of her patient's small victories, Mrs. Carter's buttoned shirt, a child's first steps with a walker, reminding her that love, like recovery, was about choosing to show up, even when it scared you. The chaplain, a kind-faced woman with gray curls, stepped forward from the corner, her presence a calm anchor amid the ICU's chaos. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice gentle. Lila looked at Ethan, seeing the man who'd bared his shame about leaving Claire Morgan, who'd promised to stay despite his fear. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice low, searching his eyes. "Sure? I need you to choose me, Ethan. Not because it's what your mom wants, but because it's us." Ethan turned to face her fully, taking both her hands, his fingers warm against the cool metal of the ring. "Lila Brooks, you're the bravest woman I know. You saw through every wall I built and chose me anyway. I'm choosing you, not because it's easy, but because a life without you isn't worth living." Tears pricked Lila's eyes as he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, revealing a white gold band studded with tiny diamonds, a compliment to Abigail's ring. "I know you have Mom's ring," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "but this is yours, our start." He slipped it onto her finger, the band settling beside the emerald like a promise made whole. Lila's breath caught, the weight of commitment grounding her. "It's perfect," she whispered, her voice trembling. The chaplain smiled, her eyes crinkling. "Let's begin." The ceremony was simple. No music or flowers beyond Maya's gift shop roses. Just 2 people promising to love in sickness and health, witnessed by a dying woman who'd orchestrated their truth. Lila spoke first, her voice steady despite the tears. "Ethan, you make me brave enough to believe in forever. I choose you, through every fear, every fight." Ethan's eyes glistened as he replied, "Lila, you've shown me what love can be. I promise to stay, to build a life with you, no matter what." Abigail's hand squeezed Lila's, her eyes bright with tears, and she clapped weakly, 3 soft taps echoing her joy despite the tubes. When the chaplain pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan kissed Lila with a tenderness that spoke of forever, his lips warm and certain. Lila leaned into him, the ICU's sterile chill fading against the warmth of their promise. Abigail's smile was radiant, her eyes closing with a peace that transcended her frail body. As they pulled apart, Lila whispered, "I love you, Mr. Caldwell." Ethan's grin was boyish, disarming. "I love you too, Mrs. Caldwell." The nurse appeared, her expression gentle but firm. "I'm sorry, but Mrs. Caldwell needs rest." Lila and Ethan stepped back, their hands still entwined, and the new band on Lila's finger was a quiet vow. In the hallway, Maya handed Lila the roses, her eyes sparkling. "You did it, girl. That was real." Lila nodded, her heart full. She thought of her work, guiding patients through recovery, and how this moment felt like her own reclaiming of courage. She imagined sharing this story with Maya's laughter, or a crowd drawn to tales of love born in crisis. Would you vow forever in a hospital room? Can love transform a lie into truth? Drop your thoughts below, give a thumbs up if this moment moves you, and stay with us to see what's next for Lila and Ethan. As they left the ICU, the weight of the rings, Abigail's and Ethan's, felt like a bridge to a future they'd chosen, together, against all odds. Lila Brooks stood in the kitchen of Ethan Caldwell's Chicago penthouse, the city's skyline glittering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The white gold band on her finger, a gift from Ethan during their hospital wedding, gleamed beside Abigail's emerald ring, both symbols of a love that had transformed from pretense to truth. Her ivory dress was replaced by a soft sweater and jeans, her auburn hair loose around her shoulders. The weight of yesterday's vows in the ICU, with Abigail's frail hand clapping softly, lingered in her heart. Yet Claire Morgan's accusations, Ethan's abandonment at the altar, and his running pattern still cast a shadow. Lila needed to know if their marriage, born in crisis, could withstand the truth of his past. Ethan entered, his charcoal suit traded for a faded t-shirt, his dark hair still damp from a shower. "Coffee?" he offered, his storm blue eyes searching hers, cautious but warm. Lila nodded, her fingers tracing the new band. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steady as she leaned against the counter. "About Claire. About us." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he nodded, pouring 2 mugs from a steaming pot. He said, handing her a cup, the ceramic warm against her palms, "No more secrets. You deserve the whole truth." They sat on the pristine white sofa, the city's hum a distant backdrop. Lila took a breath, her therapist's instinct guiding her. "Claire said you ran because things got too real. She said, I'm just another safe choice, someone you won't stay for when it gets hard." Her voice wavered, but she held his gaze. "I need to know if she's right." Ethan set his mug down, his hands clenching briefly. "Claire wasn't wrong about what I did," he said, his voice low, raw. "I left her at St. Patrick's and sent my assistant to end it. But it wasn't because I couldn't handle real. It was because it wasn't real. Her father and mine wanted a merger, not a marriage. I was 24, drowning in their expectations. I ran because I couldn't live a lie." Lila's heart ached, hearing the echo of her fear in his words. "But you didn't tell me she chose the ring," she said, lifting her hand, the emerald glinting. "That feels like a lie too." Ethan's eyes dropped, shame flickering across his face. "I should have told you. I didn't because it felt irrelevant. Claire was a mistake, a choice I made for the wrong reasons. You're different, Lila. You're not safe. You're terrifying. You make me want things I never thought I could have. A partnership, a home, someone who sees me. He reached for her hand, his touch gentle. I'm not running from you. I swear it. Lila studied their joined hands, his fingers warm against hers. She thought of her patience, like Mrs. Carter, who trusted her to guide them through the uncertainty of recovery. Trust was earned, not given. I've always played it safe, she admitted, her voice soft. After losing my parents, I built a life where I could control the outcome. Work, routine, no risks. But you've upended that, Ethan. I'm also scared you'll leave when things get messy. Ethan's grip tightened, his eyes fierce. I'm not perfect, Lila. I'll mess up, but I won't leave. You're my wife now, not because of a deal, but because I love you. Her breath caught, the word wife settling over her like a warm blanket. She thought of her work, the hours spent helping a young amputee regain mobility, celebrating each step as a victory. This was no different. Building trust was a process she was ready to navigate with Ethan. Okay, she said, her voice firm. But we need boundaries. Full honesty, no matter how hard. And you come to one of my sessions to see what I do, and who I am outside of this. Ethan's smile was tentative, relieved. Deal. I want to know all of you. The next day, Ethan joined her at the hospital, watching as she guided a teenage patient, Jamal, through exercises to strengthen his new prosthetic leg. Lila's voice was patient and encouraging, and her smile was bright as Jamal took a wobbly step. Ethan's presence, quiet but attentive, felt like a promise kept. As they left, he took her hand. You're incredible, he said, his voice soft. I see why Mom believed in you. Lila's heart swelled, the shadow of Claire fading against the light of their shared truth. She imagined telling Maya this story, or a crowd drawn to tales of love rebuilt from doubt. Can trust heal a fractured past? Would you leap with someone who's run before? Drop your thoughts below. Give a thumbs up if this moment resonates. And stay with us to see their next chapter. As they walked into the Chicago dusk, the rings on Lila's finger felt like anchors, grounding her in a love she was ready to fight for. Sunlight streamed through the windows of Lila and Ethan Caldwell's cozy Lincoln Park townhouse, illuminating the photographs that adorned every surface. Snapshots of their hospital wedding, Abigail Caldwell beaming in recovery, and quiet moments of their new life together. Lila stood in the kitchen, humming softly as she flipped blueberry pancakes, the sizzle filling the air with warmth. Her auburn hair was loose, cascading over a faded t-shirt, the emerald ring and white gold band on her finger catching the light. 6 months had passed since their ICU vows, a whirlwind of love forged from a paid pretense into a partnership that felt like home. The memory of Claire Morgan's accusations and the viral kiss had faded, replaced by a trust built through honest nights and shared days. Ethan appeared in the doorway, his dark hair tousled, wearing a worn Northwestern t-shirt Lila had bought to replace his sleek pajamas. He said, "You're up early." His storm blue eyes crinkled with a sleepy grin. Lila smirked, sliding a pancake onto a plate. "Someone's got to keep you from turning into a grumpy CEO." She stood on her toes to kiss him, the simple domesticity still making her heart flutter. "I was never grumpy," Ethan protested, wrapping his arms around her waist, nuzzling her neck. "Focused, maybe." Lila laughed, melting into his embrace. "Abigail agrees with me. You were impossible." Ethan's face lit up at the mention of his mother, a wonder that surfaced whenever they spoke of her recovery. Against all odds, Abigail had rallied after their wedding. The infection cleared, her strength returned, and she was discharged 3 weeks later. Doctors called it a miracle. Abigail called it the power of witnessing love. Now settled in a senior living community specializing in cancer recovery, she hosted Sunday dinners that Lila and Ethan never missed. "Speaking of Mom," Ethan said, pouring coffee from the pot Lila had brewed, "she called last night while you were at Maya's. She's expecting us for pot roast tomorrow. You in?" Lila flipped another pancake, grinning. "Wouldn't miss it. I'd never hear the end of it if I skipped her famous roast." Their banter paused as Lila's phone buzzed with a text from the hospital. She frowned, reading the message. She said they want to interview me for the position of head of rehabilitation, setting her spatula down. More responsibility, better pay, more desk work, less time with patients. Ethan studied her, his expression careful. "What do you want?" Lila sat across from him, fidgeting with her rings. The old me would have jumped at security, benefits, and a clear path, but I love being hands-on, helping people like Mrs. Carter or Jamal rebuild their lives. She'd recently launched a community therapy program, funded partly by Ethan's support, bringing free care to underserved patients. "Maybe I'll pitch expanding that instead," she said, her voice firm. Ethan reached for her hand, his touch steady. "Then do that. You don't need the job for security. We're secure. Choose what lights you up." Lila smiled, struck by his shift from the control-driven man she'd met. Ethan had stepped back from Caldwell Industries, hiring a president to handle daily operations and freeing him for evenings with her and weekends with Abigail. "Any regrets about scaling back?" she asked. He kissed her knuckles, his grin boyish. "Only that I didn't do it sooner. It turns out that the company runs fine without me hovering." "Who knew?" Lila laughed. "Abigail knew. She said your father's mistake wasn't leaving, but never being present." Ethan's expression grew serious. "I've been thinking about the future, Lila. The kind where we turn the spare room into a nursery. Teach our kids to choose love over fear, like you taught me." Tears pricked Lila's eyes, her heart full. "I want that too," she said. "All of it." Ethan pulled her into his arms, his voice soft. "Good, though Mom will probably ask about grandkids again tomorrow." Lila grinned mischievously. "I'll tell her we're practicing hard." Ethan nearly choked on his coffee, laughing. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me," she teased. Their laughter filled the townhouse, starkly contrasting with the sterile ICU where their love began. Lila caught their reflection in a hallway mirror, her in his t-shirt, him in wrinkled sleep clothes, both utterly happy. She thought of her work, the joy of seeing Jamal walk confidently, and of Abigail's stories at dinner, weaving their family closer. This unplanned and imperfect life was better than any she'd imagined. She pictured sharing this with Maya, or a crowd drawn to stories of love's triumph. Can a lie become a legacy? Would you build a future from a moment of truth? Drop your thoughts below. Give a thumbs up if this ending warms you, and stay with us for more stories of the heart. As Chicago woke around them, Lila knew their love, tested by deception, strengthened by trust, was their most significant victory.